What could a 12-year-old girl possibly write that would make one of the most experienced judges in America stop breathing for a moment? What kind of words could freeze an entire courtroom before a case even officially began? Before you answer, understand this. Judge Frank Caprio had spent more than 40 years on the bench. He had heard lies wrapped in tears. He had heard excuses polished by expensive lawyers. He had watched grown men break and hardened criminals remain unmoved. But on one cold March morning in Providence, something felt wrong before the case was even called. The courtroom was full that day, yet unusually quiet. Case number 2024, CV 8847 was listed as a simple parking violation appeal. Nothing dramatic, nothing special, just another file in a stack of thousands. Or so everyone thought. Bailiff Tony Rodriguez stepped forward with a lavender envelope in his hand. The handwriting on the front was careful, looping, almost fragile. It didn't look like legal mail. It didn't look like anything that belonged in a courtroom. And yet, something about it made Tony hesitate before handing it to the judge. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "this was given to me by a child." Judge Caprio looked up. That alone was unusual. Children didn't usually send letters to municipal court judges, especially not before a parking ticket hearing. He nodded once, accepting the envelope without opening it. Not yet. In the gallery, a 12-year-old girl sat perfectly still. Her name was Emma Mitchell. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles pale. Her green eyes never left the judge, not even for a second. Next to her stood her mother, Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, single mother. Exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. She wore a navy suit borrowed from a neighbor, the sleeves slightly too long. Her shoulders slumped the way shoulders do when life has been leaning on them for too long. This wasn't just about a parking ticket. It had never been just about a parking ticket. 6 months earlier, on a quiet September night, their lives had already cracked open. The air smelled like fallen leaves and distant smoke. Providence was calm that evening, unaware of what was coming. Sarah Mitchell was finishing her second job of the day. She had already worked 8 hours as a certified nursing assistant. Now it was nearly midnight, and she was mopping office floors downtown. Her feet throbbed, her back screamed, but she kept moving because rent didn't care about pain. At 11:43 p.m., her phone lit up. Emma's name flashed on the screen. Sarah smiled instinctively. She expected a good night, maybe a reminder about homework. Instead, she heard screaming. "Mom," Emma cried, barely able to breathe. "Please come home." Her voice was breaking apart. "It's Grandma. She won't wake up. She's on the floor. I'm scared." Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. Her mother, Linda Chun, had been staying with them during cancer treatment. She was strong. She was stubborn. She was Emma's best friend. And now she wasn't breathing right. Sarah didn't ask questions. She didn't think about rules. She didn't think about parking signs or fines. She only thought about one thing: getting home. She jumped into her old Honda Civic and drove like every second mattered, because it did. When she reached Westminster Street, every legal parking space was taken. Meters lined the curb like silent judges. Red paint screamed warnings she didn't read. She pulled onto the red curb anyway, left the engine running, left the door open, and ran. 12 blocks, in worn-out shoes. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred. Tears mixed with sweat as she ran through the dark streets of Providence. Behind her, parking enforcement cameras kept recording. Timers kept ticking. Rules stayed rules. When Sarah burst through the apartment door, Emma was kneeling on the bathroom floor. Linda lay motionless. Emma's hands were shaking as she followed CPR instructions from a 911 operator. Sarah dropped beside them and took over, counting, pushing, begging. The ambulance arrived minutes later. Paramedics fought hard, too hard, for too long. Linda's heart came back briefly, just long enough to break them all again. She died at 1:47 a.m. And while Sarah sat in a hospital hallway holding her daughter, her car sat alone on that red curb, unforgiven, unnoticed, unmoved by grief. By the time Sarah returned, it was gone, towed, ticketed, Charged 5 times over. 5 violations. Hundreds of dollars. Plus towing. Plus storage. A punishment waiting quietly for a woman who had chosen love over law. Back in the courtroom, Judge Caprio finally picked up the lavender envelope. He hadn't opened it yet, but Emma saw his fingers pause. Something told him this case was already different, and the letter hadn't even been read. Grief does not arrive loudly. It settles in quietly and stays. After the funeral, the world didn't stop for Sarah Mitchell. Bills still came. Work schedules didn't soften. Rent still demanded its due date. Linda Chin was gone, but the consequences of that night were only beginning. When Sarah finally found the notice on her kitchen table, her hands began to shake. 5 parking tickets. Each one stamped with a time. Each one cold and exact. As if the system had been watching her pain minute by minute. $875 in fines. $280 for towing. $40 a day for storage. The total felt unreal. Like a mistake. Like something that could be explained away. Sarah tried to breathe. She told herself logic would win. She gathered hospital records. The 911 call log. The death certificate. Proof. She believed proof mattered. The parking authority disagreed. Policy is policy, the letter said. No signature. No name. Just rules. The denial arrived 3 days before rent was due. Sarah didn't cry that night. She couldn't afford to. She went to work instead. Then she went to her second job. Then she went to a third shift she hadn't told anyone about. Emma noticed anyway. She noticed her mother eating less. Not because food wasn't there, but because Sarah insisted she wasn't hungry. She noticed the way her mother counted coins at the grocery store. The way she stared at the electric bill like it was a threat. At night, Emma lay awake listening. Listening to her mother breathe. Listening to the quiet sound of someone breaking slowly. School felt different now. The halls were louder. The desks felt farther apart. Words blurred on the page. Mrs. Donovan noticed first, then the guidance counselor. Then teachers began asking questions Emma didn't want to answer. "I'm fine," she said every time. And no one pushed, because grief is polite when it hides. November came. Then December. The payment plan started. $50 a week. Every week. No matter what. Sarah paid it. Not because she could, but because she was afraid of what would happen if she didn't. Collections. License suspension. More penalties. The fear was constant, like a shadow that never left. One night, Emma woke up thirsty. She padded quietly into the living room and saw her mother sitting in the dark. No TV. No phone. Just hands covering her face. That was the moment something changed inside Emma. Children notice things adults think they hide. They notice sacrifice. They notice fear. They notice silence. Emma sat beside her mother without speaking. She leaned her head against Sarah's shoulder. Sarah flinched, then broke. "It's not fair," Sarah whispered. "None of this is fair." Emma didn't answer. She didn't know how. But she listened, and she remembered. Days later, in civics class, Mr. Chun talked about appeals, about rights, about judges. Emma listened harder than she ever had. She learned that decisions could be challenged, that forms existed, that hearings happened, that sometimes someone listened. That night, Emma searched Judge Frank Caprio on her school computer. She watched videos. She saw kindness. She saw mercy. She saw a man who looked like he might read a letter. The idea formed slowly, dangerously, like a match struck in the dark. Emma didn't tell her mother. She couldn't. Sarah already carried too much. So Emma carried this alone. On a cold December afternoon, she skipped lunch. She took the city bus by herself for the first time. Her heart raced the entire ride. The courthouse loomed larger than she expected. Older, colder. She stepped inside with her backpack and asked a question that surprised everyone. "How do I file an appeal?" Deborah Walsh looked up from her desk. She had seen thousands of faces in 20 years. But not this one. Emma's voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't wander. She asked again. Deborah listened, and for the first time in months, Emma felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The fee nearly ended everything. $50 Emma didn't have. Her shoulders fell, but she didn't cry. Deborah saw that too. Rules bent quietly that day. A hardship waiver signed. A hearing scheduled. March 7th. Emma walked out of the courthouse with paperwork tucked inside her backpack. Her legs trembled. Her heart pounded. But the plan was alive. That night, Emma opened her notebook. She stared at the blank page and began to write. Emma wrote at night, always at night. While the apartment slept, she stayed awake. The desk lamp cast a small circle of light, like a secret. The rest of the room remained dark. Her first draft was messy, too emotional, too rushed. She tore it out. The second draft was calmer, too calm. It didn't hurt enough. She tore that one out too. By the fifth draft, her hand ached. By the 10th, she was crying silently. By the 17th, she finally stopped. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Every word mattered. Every sentence had weight. This wasn't homework. This wasn't a story assignment. This was survival. She chose lavender paper because it reminded her of Grandma, of safety, of calm before everything went wrong. She folded the pages carefully. She sealed the envelope. She wrote the address slowly, afraid of making a mistake. To Judge Frank Caprio, please read before my mom's hearing. She added her name and her age, 12. The morning of March 7th arrived colder than expected. Gray skies, heavy air. Emma told her mother she didn't feel well. Sarah touched her forehead, worry already there. I'm fine, Emma said. Then she took a breath she had been holding for months. We need to go to court. The truth landed hard. Sarah didn't yell. She didn't scold. She just stared at her daughter like she was seeing her for the first time. All those late nights, all that writing, all that silence. They rode the bus together. Neither spoke much. At the courthouse, Emma's legs felt weak, but she kept walking. Bailiff Tony Rodriguez noticed her immediately. Children didn't usually look that serious. Emma handed him the envelope. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. Please give this to the judge, she said. It's really important. Tony nodded. Something in his chest tightened. I'll make sure he gets it. Inside the courtroom, cases moved quickly. Noise complaints, expired meters, routine excuses. Emma watched Judge Caprio closely. The way he listened, the way he leaned forward. She wondered if he would really read it, or if it would become just another piece of paper. Then the recess came. Tony stepped forward. He placed the lavender envelope on the bench. Judge Caprio paused. He picked it up slowly. The courtroom waited. He opened it, and everything stopped. The first line hit him like a blow. He read it again. Then once more. His chest tightened. His throat closed. He looked up, directly at Emma. The room didn't know it yet, but the case was already over. Judge Caprio stood suddenly. We're taking a short recess, he said, voice unsteady. Please ask Ms. Mitchell and her daughter to come with me. Whispers filled the room. Sarah's heart raced. Fear flashed across her face. Emma squeezed her hand. They followed the judge into chambers. The door closed behind them. The room was quiet, warm, personal. Judge Caprio didn't sit down right away. He turned toward the window. He took a breath. Then another. Emma, he said gently, may I read your letter out loud? She nodded. He began. The words fell into the room like confessions. A child alone with her grandmother. A phone call filled with fear. A mother running through the night. Sarah covered her mouth. She hadn't known how much Emma had seen, or how deeply she had felt it. When the judge reached the end, the silence was heavy. Judge Caprio removed his glasses. His eyes were wet. This, he said quietly, is not a parking ticket case. He looked at Sarah. This is a justice case. They returned to the courtroom together. The gallery was fuller now. People sensed something had changed. Case 2024, CV 8847, the bailiff announced. Judge Caprio looked out at the room. I'm going to read something, he said, and I want everyone to listen. As his voice carried Emma's words across the courtroom, Something rare happened. Strangers felt connected. Hardened faces softened. The room breathed together. When he finished, no one spoke. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, "the law exists to serve people, not destroy them." He paused. "And today, the law will serve you." The courtroom did not move. Not a chair. Not a breath. Not a sound. Judge Frank Caprio sat still, looking down at the papers in front of him, but not really seeing them. The lavender letter rested beside the case file. No longer just paper, now something heavier. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen at the defense table. Her hands trembled slightly, and she pressed them together to stop it. Emma stood beside her, shoulders squared, eyes wide, heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Judge Caprio lifted his head slowly. His eyes moved across the courtroom. The clerks, the attorneys, the strangers who had come annoyed about their own tickets, and now forgot why they were there. "This court," he said, voice calm but weighted, "has heard many parking cases." He paused. The pause stretched. "Thousands," he continued, "and in most of them the law is simple." Another pause. "But sometimes," he said, "the law is blind when it should be seeing." A woman in the gallery wiped her eyes. Someone else leaned forward. Judge Caprio turned to Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell," he said gently, "you did not wake up that night planning to violate the law." Sarah shook her head slowly. "You did not park on a red curb because you didn't care," he continued. "You did it because your 12-year-old child was alone with a dying woman." Emma swallowed hard. "You ran," Judge Caprio said. "You didn't walk. You didn't hesitate. You ran." He looked down at the citation again. "And for that," he said quietly, "you were punished." His voice changed then. Not louder, sharper. "You were fined again and again," he said. "Not once, not twice, 5 times." A murmur spread through the room. "You were charged towing fees," he went on. "Storage fees. Penalties stacked on top of grief." Sarah's shoulders shook. She tried to stop herself. She failed. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "This court is not here to add weight to someone who is already drowning," he said. "It is here to stop the drowning." Silence again. Deep. Total. "Therefore," Judge Caprio said, and his voice carried, "this court dismisses every single citation." The words hung in the air. "All fines," he continued, "are dismissed." Emma blinked. "Once. Twice. All fees," he said, "are dismissed." Sarah gasped. "You owe—" Judge Caprio finished. "Nothing." The courtroom exploded. Applause broke out before anyone could stop it. People stood. Hands clapped. Someone cried out, "God bless you." Judge Caprio raised his hand. The noise slowly fell. "There's more," he said. The room leaned in again. "You have already paid part of this," he said to Sarah. "And that money," he added firmly, "will be returned to you." Sarah covered her mouth. "Every dollar," he said. Emma grabbed her mother's sleeve. Judge Caprio glanced toward the clerk. "And I am also authorizing," he said, choosing his words carefully, "an emergency hardship relief payment." The courtroom held its breath. $2,000, he said. The sound that followed was not applause. It was disbelief. It was relief. It was something breaking open. Sarah collapsed forward, sobbing openly now. Emma wrapped her arms around her, holding on as if afraid this might disappear as she let go. Judge Caprio watched them quietly. "Emma," he said after a moment. She looked up, startled. "Would you come here, please?" Emma stepped forward slowly. Her legs felt like they might give out. She stopped at the bench. Judge Caprio leaned down. "So they were eye level. You changed this courtroom today," he said. "Do you understand that?" Emma shook her head. "You reminded us," he continued, "why justice exists." He reached under the bench and brought out a small leather journal. Worn. Old. "This belonged to my father," he said. He believed words mattered. He placed it in Emma's hands. "So do I," he said. Emma's fingers curled around it. She couldn't speak. The judge looked at Sarah again. "You raised a brave child," he said. "And bravery like this deserves protection, not punishment." The gavel came down softly. Case dismissed. Court adjourned. But no one moved. People stood one by one, offering help. An attorney, a business owner, a landlord, a stranger who simply said, "You're not alone." The system that had failed them suddenly surrounded them. Later, outside the courthouse, sunlight hit Emma's face. She blinked against it. Sarah breathed deeply for the first time in months. The weight was gone. Not all grief, but the crushing part. They walked down the steps together, mother and daughter, still standing. And back inside, Judge Frank Caprio sat alone for a moment longer, staring at the lavender envelope. He had seen thousands of cases, but this one would stay with him forever.